esse link secreto?
Não, tá liberado.
Tá liberado pra galera? Eu falei pro pessoal do Quebrando Controle dos Jogos do Nordeste. Aí eu falei assim, eu vou. Manda uma pergunta aí pra eu fazer, aí eu falo sobre Quebrando Controle e vocês colocam na mensagem de vocês, né? Aí
Aqui tá tudo ok.
eu acho que já.
Só refresca o mais possível. Choque.
Ao vivo. Estamos ao vivo.
O problema é que essa câmera do jeito que tá, valoriza um lado meu que.
Avança.
Não a falta de algo e não o ter algo a mais.
A falta da barba.
A falta do cabelo.
Ah.
Valoriza a falta de cabelo. Eu não gosto disso. Eu quero parecer jovem. Eu ainda pareço um pouco jovem.
Não está estático imagem.
Estático.
Posso mandar o link, então, para o pessoal da Universidade do Nordeste?
Pode.
Para eles
Explicarem? Só estou aguardando aqui a câmera se comportar um pouco melhor.
Acho que ela está tirando uma foto.
Oi?
Eu acho que ela está tirando uma foto.
Mas acabou de entrar.
Miguel. Acabei de conversar com o pessoal aqui, eles liberaram esse link, assiste aí. Pode divulgar. Então pode colocar lá no site de vocês que vai ser essa transmissão com esse link aí. Que daqui a pouco o Eric Zimmerman está aqui e vai dar palestra para a galera. Você vai inclusive ver eu lá no ao vivo, está rodando já.
Agora foi, eu acho.
Acho que ele está entrando nesse programinha. Eu vou dar um quit desse programa aqui. Ele abre aqui. Esse é o programa que o Pedro Soares instalou aqui. Sei lá, referências.
Não funciona, abre o programa e para.
Abre o programa e para. Câmera 7.
Gilson, onde estão os recipientes, os copinhos para fazer as pastas, ou colocar os...
Os potinhos estavam lá na cozinha, mas não são
Os potes grandes?
Vê lá, porque a Juliana guardou, acho que na geladeira. Ah, os recipientes, não sei.
Parece muito grande.
Eu já tenho as mesas aqui fora,
Precisa
aí
colocar.
eu não sei mais o que eu faço.
Mas cadê a Ju?
Ela deu uma saída, acho que ela foi buscar açúcar.
Acho que agora tem que esperar, porque eu preciso terminar de configurar. Não sei porque não está dando
Se
certo.
quiser, eu posso dar uma olhada.
A câmera está reconhecida, mas não está entrando, na verdade. Congelou a imagem aqui. Tá, essa transmissão. Não sei.
Eu vou pedindo lá para fazer uma ligação, então.
Tá.
Vai ter microfone?
Não, porque tem espaço aqui.
Ô, Ju, vai ser igual aquela vez que tem a lista dos pagantes e dos novos pagantes ou não?
Melhor perguntar, pessoal chegando.
Alô, alô.
Quem não
Testando
pagou,
o som.
anota o nome, só para a gente
Uhum. E tá quanto?
São vários preços. Pega o nome da pessoa. Se a pessoa já paguei. Tem.
Tá, e se não
Se
for,
pagou, você anota o nome.
você anota
depois
só o
escreve
nome e depois
e
paga.
telefone.
A favor de açúcar.
Nome e telefone. Tá bom. Perfeito.
Deixa eu oferecer um pedaço de chocolate. Aqui não seja favor, só que a parte de
Oh, que saco.
Alô, tudo bem? Olá, tudo bem? Ah, só um minuto. Já estão chegando pessoas presentes.
Sabe, acho que na hora você ficar lá na porta
Eu já vou
recebendo.
ficar.
Em vez de ficar pelo telefone, você já fica lá.
Tá bom.
Opa, e aí? Tudo bem? Tranquilo, obrigado por ter vindo. Terminando aqui de configurar.
quem está aqui? O senhor?
Opa!
Mas ficou muito bom.
Eu nem sabia que era o Marcelo. Eu nem sei, é o Rigon. É isso, acabou. É o Rigon. É o cara das gym. Continua fazendo as gym?
Agora deu uma parada.
Eu venho no evento, no gym. Eu conheci ele por causa disso. Ele é o quando tem algum evento, alguma coisa assim, ele é o cara que organiza.
Nesse retorno para alguém dizer que eu quero organizar assim. No início eu estava com a ideia, né?
Eu estava, inclusive, com o fundo governamental organizando, não estava? Eu lembro que teve uma época que eu estava envolvido lá, junto na política e tal.
Agora você faz a Campinas, né? Em Campinas a gente conseguiu bastante coisa assim, indiretamente continua metido, né? Porque o Sebrae está querendo dar uma olhada no interior, eles vão organizar 10 dias podem ter palestras propostadas.
Você já está no Sebrae?
Agora eu dando ele lá, não, mas eu converso com
Está tendo agora o evento do Sebrae.
Demanda mais palestra.
É que eu sei que está tendo agora o evento do Sebrae.
Que a gente faz.
O pessoal que trabalhava comigo, eles se inscreveram no jogo de Lula no Sebrae. Inscreveram um violé no Sebrae.
Eles estão eles estão com várias coisas. Tem uma aceleradora, que foi lançado, né? De novo. E agora teve esse Games, que é para Pitch.
É para Pitch, é isso mesmo. E aí eles colocaram um jogo lá. Eu nem posso trabalhar em outro jogo, porque na Fanativa eu dei um contrato de exclusividade. Aí o pessoal chegou e falou assim: vamos colocar o seu jogo, só que a gente vai continuar. Eu disse: tá bom. Diz que o jogo é meu, mas eu não posso trabalhar, porque, né, no máximo eu posso olhar a arte, olhar o que ela fez, escrever alguma história, mas eu não posso ficar fazendo freelance junto aí, né? Vocês estão ligados? O pessoal falou: não, a gente tá, mas é que o jogo é bom, a gente quer escrever. Porque os caras trabalharam junto comigo durante muito tempo, né? É o pessoal que fez a programação. Eram duas empresas, né? Era a minha que fez toda a arte, eles fizeram a programação, e aí o jogo estava pronto e eles queriam se inscrever, né? Aí a gente pode.
O André, né?
O André é o
seu.
Você vai lá com ele lá? É. Ó, vou tirar uma foto lá para falar assim, até encontrei aqui, acabou de falar mal de você. Olha o que eu encontrei aqui, ó. Acabou de falar mal do Inventor. Falou assim, e aquele cara lá, nossa senhora, que zoado.
Ele apareceu uma Game Jam também. Foi parceiro Intel, que então estava lançando uma câmera que ia ser competidora do Kinética. Sim.
Então foi nessa época, porque quem era parceiro Intel era a Canadá Games, né? Aí quando estava com parceria, eu falei assim, então vai lá, né? Aí eles faziam esse negócio da Intel que a gente tinha essa parceria, e aí depois de um tempo chegavam assim, mas a gente é parceiro do Tabajara e tal, né? Será que a gente conseguia a gente ter o selo também? E aí o pessoal falou assim, tá bom. Aí colocaram junto eles no selo. Foi justamente na época que a gente estava fazendo um violé junto. Foi nessa época mesmo. Que a gente estava com essa parceria da Intel. Legal. Nunca aproveitei nada da parceria. Eu ficava com medo de pegar os equipamentos, né? Porque eles davam equipamento, davam um monte de coisa, né? Aí nessa época eles davam aquele que era tipo Kinect, né? E aí eu pensava, não vou conseguir pegar.
O que me preocupou um pouco em São Paulo é que assim, tem várias agências que têm muito dinheiro, só que eles não conversam dinheiro. Então tá todo mundo lançando incubadora. A Atenção está lançando uma incubadora, o Sebrae está lançando uma incubadora, a agência está com uma incubadora, a PEX, não sei o quê. Gente, se você juntasse a grana e ele faz tipo, mais de uma iniciativa, parece uma aceleradora legal também, mas faz outras iniciativas. Porque
eu agora estou trabalhando para outra pessoa, então não estou mais dentro desse monte de coisa. Nossa, eu ia direto nesses eventos e tal, mas ficava por dentro, agora só estou fazendo.
Eu coloquei.
Eu estou trabalhando na Fanativa, mas Fanativa é jogo Cold Cross, que é o nosso maior jogo lá. fico só mudando o code cross, mudando as coisinhas. Tem até meio do code cross, ó. Você viu isso aqui, ó? Eu ganhei a meia da Fanatico.
Olha,
Ó. Fanatico code cross.
Depois que o Trudeau lançou a nota, né? Tipo, acho que o nascimento para ser adulto.
Né?
Tá liberado, né?
O único problema é que essa meia não é do meu tamanho. É feito para pezinho pequena, né? Eu coloquei ela 2 vezes, ela rasgou. Sabe que essa menina é feita para rasgar. É meia para pezinho pequeno. Porque o Code Cross ele é feito para velha, né? Não é feito para velha. 80% do público do Code Cross são mulheres acima de 50 anos. Esse é o público do Code Cross. Mulheres de 40 para cima. Na verdade, de 40 para cima, mas na verdade o que tem mais é 50 para cima. Tudo bom, todas vó jogando. Aí eles vão fazer essa meia, né? Para quê? A mulher é pobre.
Eu tô chegando nesse recorte.
já a gente tá ali. Quer dizer, a partir de 50, né?
Agora de
Não,
mulher,
a partir
não.
de mulher.
Mas aí agora que o jogo começou a falar assim, não, vamos tentar pegar um público mais jovem, começou a pegar um público mais jovem que está gostando, né? Porque a gente começou a colocar o codezinho em 3D, personagem, dá para trocar skin. É o mesmo jogo, só que agora tem um personagem que dá para trocar skin. E aí o pessoal tem gostado mais, o público mais jovem tem aderido um pouco mais, né? Mas aí o jogo com a mulher velha. É isso. A tiazona ficar jogando lá e ganha tudo. Ele é um jogo de cruzadinho, ground de cruzadinho. Vamos jogar o Code Cross pra você ver. É um jogo bom.
É que o último que eu vi da Fanatico foi o Arena.
Mas o Arena é novo. O Arena, o Arena é protótipo. O Arena é protótipo. Esse jogo aqui, que é o Gold, ele é o... Eu não lembro.
É o carro-chefe.
Que ele faz sucesso desde 2017. A partir de 2017, ó, eu faço esse bichinho aqui, tá vendo? E aí você clica nele, e aí você joga. Ganha baú. Você fica muito tempo sem jogar, o pessoal te dá um presente para.
Estão colocando o lootbox no jogo, né?
O pior é que nem é lootbox. O pior é que nesse caso aqui nem é lootbox. É uma cruzadinha. Só que é uma cruzadinha que tem um somzinho, há muito som. Ele é feito para ser um jogo zen.
Aliás, a game de Minas, hoje eles organizaram que eles reformataram a associação inteira e estão relançando a associação.
Só que assim é muito alto. Aí o som não fica tão zen, não. Associação de do quê?
De ideias.
Que ideia. É isso. Aí você fica o dia inteiro resolvendo isso daqui. Quando você chega no final, aí você tem esses personagenzinhos aqui, eles te dão um poderzinho que você joga e você resolve alguma coisa, né? Isso tudo colado. E quando você chega no final, aparece o povo falando, você conseguiu. E aí, o mais interessante é que assim, ele fala, e aí ele aparece a palavra embaixo, assim, a palavra que você respondeu mais rápido. Aí aparece embaixo a palavra que você respondeu mais rápido, né? E aí, aí algumas palavras foram, por exemplo, bomba atômica. Então tem vídeo no YouTube, para assim, olha só o que a Fanati gosta. Aí para assim, bomba atômica, aí o Code vem atrás e faz. Aí eles pegaram várias palavras zoadas assim, né? Maus tratos. Maus tratos, dá para assim, o Code, maus tratos. Aí o pessoal começou a criar blacklist.
Não, quero uma panela só.
Quantas pessoas você acha que vai ser jogo tosco? Diz um número.
5.
5 meses. É um ótimo número. Esse número é por quê? Por mês? Por ano?
Eu ia falar por dia, mas acho que é muito. Por semana.
São 3 milhões por dia.
3 milhões por dia.
Esse jogo é jogado 3 milhões por dia.
Você trabalha na Fanati?
Na Fanati.
Eu sou mal fã desde o Letroca.
Letroca. Todo mundo conhece o Letroca.
Sou uma velha,
Ó,
sou uma velha por aí.
eu tenho a meia da Paraty, ó. Tá mostrando isso.
Eu e minha esposa joga tudo de joguinho de palavra, todo dia. A
Não,
nossa
sou
tradição
uma
familiar.
por aí, assim.
Teve na época que era meu próprio coisa. O café sentado, ok, vamos lá. Wordle, letreco, tá? Hoje é conexo e eletroso. São dois que eu falo. Aí eu faço do cross-level também.
3 milhões de pessoas por dia dando 1 centavo para Paraty. Tem noção? Os caras são muito. Se você for colocar no papel, normalmente o pessoal fala assim, a maior empresa de games do Brasil, normalmente o pessoal fala aquela que virou americana agora, que é a Wildlife e a outra lá, a Aquiles, né? A Paraty tem um lucro líquido maior que as duas. Assim, elas...
O pessoal quer fazer jogo e acaba perdendo as oportunidades que surgem, né?
Mas hoje, os jogos que a Wildlife e que a Aquiles fazem demanda de muita gente, o custo é muito alto e o número de pessoas não é tão grande. O Code Cross, 4 pessoas estão fazendo e 3 milhões de pessoas jogando. Então, se você for colocar em termos de empresa, a Paraty ela é a maior desses jogos, assim, né? Ela só não é a maior do Brasil porque tem as empresas de cassino, né? As empresas de cassino são muito malucas.
Que você pega, você tá mexendo no Metroidvania agora, né? Aí tá falando o número do você tem o Hollow Knight, que é tipo um caso fora da linha assim, para Metroidvania 2D. Tudo bem, pode entrar. É 5 milhões aqui na Steam. De costas, tudo bem, mas assim, o tempo eu entendo. E qual é o investimento que
Esses jogos são uma vez, né?
Tudo bom?
Opa!
Beleza? Eu sou Edu.
E aí? Beleza? Gostei do chapéu.
Você tá me sentindo chapéus.
Eu usava só boio. Aí eu parei de usar. Sabe por que eu parei de usar? Porque principalmente a minha esposa falava assim, não, tá caindo o seu cabelo. Aí eu parei de usar e continuou caindo. Agora eu tenho que usar pra...
Pô, eu tive um problema com isso que eu comecei a usar minoxidil, como o cabelo não cair, e aí começou a crescer uma coceira, porque o corpo não sabe, né, que eu tô usando o cabelo. Aí depois eu pensei, show.
O meu cresce monocelha mesmo, então...
Não pode
Não só via a monocelha, mas via ela pra cima.
Não, mas aí você é Klingon, né? Aí é outra coisa.
Ah, já tá rolando?
Não, não, Klingon, cara. Pô, puta visual.
Aqui, ó.
Tá.
Mas você quer aquela foto que eu tirei na
E o microfone tá... tem
na
microfone. Ah, e é bom assim?
Salvador.
Por falar, pessoal, tá silêncio.
Você tem que ir pra mim também,
Não sou Tabajara.
Tabajara.
Bom, eu ia falar Marcelo, mas ninguém conhece como
Então,
Marcelo.
assim, tá no
Eu sou
enquadramento.
Rodrigo Olstein.
Entendi.
Beleza.
Eu
Mas
trabalho
vai
na
deixar aberto.
Beleza.
Sou o cara
Mesmo.
Se você me procurar no YouTube, eu dou aula de 3D.
Entendi.
Então, as pessoas me conhecem mais porque eu
Aqui,
Eu
não sei se você
esqueço
não
dessa
tem
cultura de São Paulo de chegar,
Nunca mexi.
lançando limite.
Sim. Aqui você vai ver que o pessoal está postando.
Não, não, São Paulo, não,
E tem banners aqui.
Nossa, irmão!
Eu posso criar
Que da hora
banner.
Essa foto.
Com o nome,
Muito
a
foda.
que você fez ali, né? Eric Zimmerman.
Isso. O Eric Zimmerman entrou na configuração.
Da
Viu, cara? Começamos
Não,
em
eu São Paulo,
60
eu sou da UFR.
minutos.
Não é melhor colocar às 20? Porque senão a gente tem que atualizar.
Começamos às 20 horas.
Ninguém conhece aqui no Ocidente.
Pessoal chegando.
Na China.
Adiciona um banner.
Você fala chinês?
Tô aprendendo, mano. Tô aprendendo por causa do estúdio.
Tá aqui, exibir, tá?
Fala japonês, mas aí é o orientalismo. Vai chegar na orientalidade japonesa
Pra mesmo assim.
Legal.
Isso aí, eu já fiz uma espalhada de link. Eu já estou transmitindo para
Não tem. Embora o Lucas disse
YouTube. Da Game Fortune, né?
Isso aconteceu com um projeto chamado de cultura, não sei se vocês
No
conhecem.
canal do YouTube.
É um projeto social
Os três
belíssimo, assim, que constrói essas unidades aí em área de vulnerabilidade.
da
O
rede
primeiro que eu
clara.
servi lá,
Um já fica assim,
e ano passado a gente foi naquele escola
chegando de calor.
só inteligência,
Ah,
técnico da turismo.
E aí nos comentários.
Eu ouvi sobre
Você
mas eu não
Olha, eu tô
Isso
Que legal isso.
Faça as perguntas, pode colocar aqui.
Você fez alguma coisa
Eu tô sempre falando.
Porque eu
A mente tá
tava
na minha fábrica de estudos. Vamos sempre falar.
Isso aqui
Porque eu tava
isso é
justamente
teu.
procurando esse evento aqui, e eu vi o...
Tem.
E aí, eu achei interessante porque existia um tempo atrás, em São Paulo,
Se o Eric conseguir acordar,
onde o pessoal juntava as duas comunidades, professores, aí dava aula aos adolescentes, e aí eu dava aula lá para os presidentes adolescentes. Aí você pô, será que é o mesmo? Não, você chamou de não.
Ela pertence a
outra coisa.
a família de cultura pertence agora, pertence ao governo do estado de São Paulo.
Entendi.
E aí a gente está investindo para potência de cultura, entendeu? A galera é muito boa. Muito boa. Lá tinha os jogos, eles estudaram lá muito bom. Então, legal que você vai fazer.
Deixa eu passar meu computador. Só manda mensagem.
Que legal, dos copos de pixel art. Você devia fazer um dos copos de pixel art. Aí você não você doutor em ninguém.
Eu estou retornando para eu fui idealizador e organizador do Festival de Jogos Independentes, que hoje está na experiência. E eu elaborei um estatuto que foi o Kickstarter para a Games.
Que legal!
Eu participei das reuniões de fundação, até que eu tapei de chão.
Entendi.
Ok, deixa eu passar. E paralelamente.
É um clássico, vai ficar maior do que.
Não, na verdade ficou menor do que o meu estatuto. Eles cortaram praticamente tudo que era importante, ficaram só com representação comercial.
Que estamos sendo gravados para perguntar que gestão que foi.
Foi a primeira. Literalmente. Eu não entrei. Tá pausado.
Tá lá.
Mas tá pausado, eu acho. Mas não, isso daí é informação que eu falo, né? Eu participei da fundação, só que na época eu estava com a minha empresa trabalhando no projeto do Sistema Brasileiro de Digital. Então, eu acabei faltando algumas reuniões que eram durante a semana, justamente porque eu precisava estar no laboratório. E eles eles incluíram uma cláusula que a empresa precisava ter o KNAI específico para a produção de jogos. Naquela época, para você mudar o KNAI, demorava meses. E,
Aliás, eu acho que não existe nada de games, então.
não, tem algumas específicas que são. Hoje a minha empresa tem, né? Eu coloquei. Mas na época não tinha.
Mas se eu sou meio, eu consigo colocar no
Pois é.
jogos?
Não, o de jogos mesmo é software e meio não.
Ah, sim. Pode, tá? Os jogos no máximo simples, né?
Mas talvez o novo.
Espero não torcer, né?
que entre esse e coloca também. Aumente
O
também o limite.
problema é que assim, foi destruído o CONCA. O CONCA é o conselho que se reúne para tomar decisão em cima do que o RP já é levantado de dados. Desde o Bolsonaro foi destruído o CONCA. Não existe mais. Não tem previsão de reunião do
Só
CONCA.
que o Bolsonaro destruiu uma coisa muito importante.
Não, mas já teve 3 anos para reconstruir. Você continua parado.
Isso que é foda. Fiz o L pra caralho, mas de vez em quando.
Provavelmente eles estão resolvendo tem que ir mais embaixo. Na verdade, eles estão resolvendo mais embaixo.
Mas aí tá parado nisso. Você já fez toda uma pesquisa, desde o Marco Legal fez,
Marco Legal.
a gente deu 5 dias, né? Para estabelecer isso.
O marco legal é uma coisa que estava no estatuto.
Nossa, e aí precisou de outro
20 anos
código.
depois, outro cor.
Olha, se o Kim não tivesse colocado o poder lá.
É a única coisa boa que o Kim fez.
Às vezes você olha na ameaça aqui e morre.
Vamos entrando. Deixa eu te fazer uma pergunta. Ô, Gilson. Beleza?
Deixa o telefone.
Ô, Gilson, quero te fazer uma pergunta. O que está lá atrás é um MSX japonês? Lá atrás.
Ou é um processador de texto?
Que caneta?
Ele é um MSX ou ele é só um processador de texto?
Acho que 4.
What is a processor?
É o famoso que tem um MSX dentro, mas não.
Aluna de produção de games da USP aqui no Brasil.
E aí?
Nossa, diretor não pode,
Mas,
Eu vou continuar fazendo propaganda.
Por favor, porque você tem que falar de você também.
Obrigada.
Aí, eu estava de dinossauro na indústria. Eu estava na reunião de fundação da SPI, eu tenho um estúdio que eu organizei.
como é que é os espaços de
A gente faz um jogo 2D, assim, quadro interativo, enquanto...
Puta, que foda. Como que é o nome do estúdio, mano?
WA?
Eles sempre tem que lançar nada, mas esse ano a gente vai lançar 2 jogos.
Que legal.
Não posso falar de um deles.
Vou dar lá em Stone Responder?
Sim, já está com o curso lá do áudio, esse eu posso falar.
Boa, vou falar lá então. Que legal.
E eu também sou presidente da Associação Paulista de Criadores de Jogos. Sede Jogos
Legal.
Que é o nome das sedes mais certas do mundo das sedes jogos, né? De Minas era game, deram os canos, fizeram um puta de
Aí você que eu tenho que colar.
Hoje eles conseguiram relançar o
Sim.
É você que tem que colar para chegar de sindicalizar a diferença. Tá bom, isso é importante.
Por isso que a Flávia Gato, que é a minha vice-presidente.
Tá bom.
Ela está agora com o PCBR. Ela é coordenadora do PCBR e aí ela está ajudando a coordenar essa parte
De sindicato. Que legal, mano.
E é isso, você saiu que no momento, lá do Ponte não são abertos sindicatos. Se a gente não for lá e protocolar logo no dia 1, algum sindicato, seja o sindicato, seja quem tem, mais sabe controlar, vai
falar isso com o pessoal da CEGES.
Vocês conversam. A gente tem um conselho das associações, que a gente tem chamado agora de participar, caso não participe. Mas já tem 21 estados. Já. Bom. A gente está justamente apontando para isso, senão a gente já
Está na lista do trabalhinho agora.
Presidente Rodrigo da Terra.
Não é mais ali, é tudo? Não, abre eles.
Abre eles.
Porque teve um tempo que foi que é animadora também. A Lê.
A Ale. A Ale também não fez muita coisa. A Ale também estava na parte.
Estava no começo, né?
Estava no começo.
Sim.
Na verdade, no começo era o Ale, né?
Sim. Ela era professora na faculdade.
Mas a Ale está mais interessada em audiovisual mesmo. Sempre foi ela.
Mas sempre foi bom. Isso que é doido, né? Porque isso quer dizer que, pelo menos por um período de tempo, a Averlitz era presidenciada por uma pessoa que não era do corre de games.
Eles tinham.
Eu sei. Agora, nesse momento,
A Lê, apesar de ela ser conhecida muito como essa parte de vídeo, ela fez alguns dos primeiros jogos.
Fez, o Gustavinho, o Desinho lá.
Eu lembro do Dando Caixãozinho. Até tinha.
Agora,
Mas eu não fiz consistente.
saiu um edital de BR que eles vão lançar, acho que um livro da Lasanha Assassina.
É um negócio complicado. Porque quem está representando games, eles arranjaram uma cadeira no Centro de Cultura Nacional. Quem está na lista está saindo.
Tá.
Assim, é importante que tenha games. Mas, pô, podia ser um dev.
Sim. O ideal é ser alguém que trampa, né?
Faz parte do processo, né?
Porque sabe os problemas, né?
Vai ser quem tem dinheiro também.
Vai acabar sendo isso.
Isso é um problema, né? Porque quando se fiscalizar, não necessariamente você vai perguntar para os interesses da classe.
O Rodrigo Terra. Quem que ele tem atrás dele? O Justus.
O Justus. Ela era da Darwin.
É verdade.
Aquele marco legal, a gente só conseguiu reverter porque a gente começou a funcionar
Os acessos,
por causa disso.
e o Márcio Filho fez o serviço que deu a cara a tapa.
Eu acho que a gente começou a reverter de fato a coisa, porque foi assim, eu comecei a pegar uma galera que era química, eu comecei a conversar com eles e mostrar que o argumento do cara era tudo de lado. E aí eles começaram, inclusive, a perguntar o cara, tipo, não, pô, você tá falando besteira.
Mas
começou
você falou a verdade. Eu lembro quando começou essa papagaiada, eu falei assim, cara, mas se não fosse ele, porque ele tem voz, tá querendo ou não tem voz, pro bem ou pro mal, pra apontar. Na hora que ele levantou a bola, todo mundo começou a falar de jogo. Se ele não tivesse levantado a bola, seja pro lado errado, ninguém ia começar a falar.
Brindar é um ato sempre coletivo. Maior igual a dois.
Você sabe que uma das minhas profissões dos sonhos, e eu descobri isso bem tarde, né? É ser brindador oficial da casa.
Então, por favor, venha inaugurar.
Opa!
Temos aqui
Brindador oficial.
as frutinhas, né? Fiquem à vontade. Bebam com moderação. Com moderação.
Quem é esse moderação? Chama ele de vamos brindar. A gente chama ele.
Especificamente nessa turma, não vai ter pré-aborto na semana da Denise Banqueira, por conta do tempo. Porque geralmente ela é disponibilizada com um prazo que acontece na segunda semana de aula, né? Como nessa turma passou para a primeira, para não ter problema, não prejudicar nenhum dos alunos, a gente deixou só pós-work, tá bom? Mas tá o conjunto ali completo, se você tiver oportunidade. Porque como está na primeira semana de aula, não tem tempo lá para fazer a postagem, sem prejudicar os alunos. Já como a gente está matriculando também, então, nesse caso específico, só vai ter pós-work, tá? Mas tem lá as indicações para o pessoal fazer as atividades prévias, tem um caminho, tem a disciplina, né, para eles conseguirem responder. Nesse caso específico, acho que não vai ser problema. Eu acho que era ficar como espelho ali do projeto que a gente tem que fazer o teste já. Eu acho que aí esse próprio sistema vai ser o ambiente dos alunos, né? Então, está na transição.
Nós vamos começar daqui a pouquinho. Eu acho que quem tinha que vir já veio. Fazer o bom, brincar o bom.
Começa a chover,
Se você puder pegar uma cadeira, bem? Se você puder pegar uma cadeira, trazer aqui um pouco para frente, vamos desligar aqui essa luz.
Um pezinho tá.
Tinha um pezinho?
Da outra vez que tinha.
Esse para trás do sofá, já está por aqui.
É tipo é um apoio.
Um pezinho.
É um negócio de ferro assim, que abre.
Eu não estou achando. Você quer usar a velha solução da caixa?
É, eu pensei, só que vai atrapalhar um pouco, né? O espaço.
Ou
Mas-
esse banquinho que tem uma escadinha que tem várias alturas.
Não, acho que é a caixa melhor.
A caixa não é mais charmosa.
Uhum. Deixa eu dar uma outra olhada.
Essa é a caixa.
Não,
Uma caixinha é um termo.
não, é um termo, mas não é uma caixa, é um case, sabe? Eu vou achar. Isso aqui, ó.
Ah, entendi. De onde você é?
Eu sou de Alagoas.
Tá certo. Se fosse paulista,
Por quê?
não gosto muito de paulista, você tá certo, se ela não.
Você não é daqui, não?
Eu sou. Mas eu sou a cota legal.
Você é o quê?
A cota legal.
Ah, entendi. Tudo bem. Ah, não, pra ouvir, né? Tá bom, pessoal. Tá ótimo.
Obrigada.
É aqui, então é aqui que eu vou ficar. Não?
Eu sei que ela fugindo da frente, parece que vai ter participação junto com ele, eu tenho que mais coisa. Ah, eu sei que aqui não. Vou falar que nós que é jovem é mais tempo.
Jovem mais tempo, jovem é mais tempo.
Okay. So now we are going to start. Everything okay with the live streaming? Hello everyone online. And welcome, bem-vindos, bem-vindas. Essa é a casinha da vida. Um projeto que começou há 3 semanas. É a nova sede da Games for Change Latin America. Agora chamada Games for Change América. For 50 years, Games for Change Latin America has been headquartered at the University of São Paulo, not far from here. Started by a professor in the Department of Human Resources. But I think that the project itself matured over years, and we decided to move. At the same time, out of the university, and at the same time, going deeper into the university. Então, a gente está num momento que a Gilson Schwartz, depois de 15 anos, ela sai da Universidade de São Paulo, virtual, continua o professor, tempo integral, mas houve uma mudança no regimento da universidade, anos de debate, que permite aos professores empreenderem sem fins lucrativos fora da universidade. So after years of fighting about professors, let's say, possibility of creating projects outside of the university. This was finally established that we can, as a full professor, we can organize non-profits outside of the university. So this is why we moved Gilson from within the university structure. This new place is a totally independent non-profit. It's called the Institute of Economics. This Institute de Iconomia, it's a lab, it's an open lab. Most of the things here are personal things that I brought from my life. Some objects, paintings from friends. The space is open to the territory, to the neighbors. I have here Bruno, who's also in the ludic industry, let's say. Então, a gente tem pessoas incríveis para isso, muito presentes com vocês. Hey, before you start, relax. I would like everyone to briefly introduce him or herself, because you are a very special group of people. And I think that this is very important. Right? Also, those who are online, you can always follow me up for any questions that may arise from people who are watching online. Gabriel Kreber will open the night. He's a student at the Department of Music at the University of São Paulo. We have an amazing partnership with musicians, students, and professors at the Department of Music. So this month, we are celebrating Quilombo Inteligente, one of the most important Brazilian composers. His birthday will be March 5th. So we are doing music, live music. We are screening Villa Lobos in Paris. It's an amazing documentary about the state of Paris. We're doing classes, and the next month it will be Racing Spectrum. So it's an open space for culture, healthy and I would say progressive entertainment. We are living through a difficult period here. It's traumatic, I have to say. So this is a place for all of us who really think that diversity and is important. We will not give up. Actually, I think we have lots of things to teach the American people, because they are now living something like Bolsonaro, actually a very good Bolsonaro. So this is also resistance, but not in a negative sense, in a positive sense. Sharing our values, we are launching a very, I would say, courageous initiative. Everything that will take place in this house, in the network that we are establishing, the Institute of Advanced Studies, with more now, almost 150 communities all over Brazil that are submitting their projects to our project at the Institute of Advanced Studies, Quilombo Inteligente. So it's a hub, it's complex, it's within the university, at the same time it's beyond the university. Games for Change, we will be headquartered now, from now on here, a gente vai fazer muitas atividades por pesquisa. E antes da gente fazer uma apresentação, eu gostaria que cada um falasse um pouco de si, para o Eric saber o que está aqui em São Paulo. Vou pedir para o Gabriel abrir com música, né? So, music, an opening with Gabriel Kremer. Obrigado, Gabriel. The stage is yours. Pode falar em português?
Boa noite, gente. Fiz uma seleção de 3 músicas, jogos que eu gosto muito. Então vou tocar aqui para vocês.
Não precisa dizer que música é, não é possível. Yes, it's the Star Wars theme. Star Wars theme.
E agora eu vou tocar um medley de um outro jogo também clássico que eu gosto muito. finalizar, eu vou tocar uma música de um jogo que é mais recente, né, em comparação a vários anos, que é o Undertale, que referencia muitos clássicos, né?
violonista, um medley de músicas ligadas aos games. Inspired. Okay, let's start with Elo down there operating our camera. Elo is just recently joined the staff of Change América Latina. So please introduce yourself and then point the finger. We did point the finger to the next one. You present more yourself.
Okay, so my name is Eloisa, but everybody calls me Elo. I've been working as a game designer for 15 years now. So I started here in Brazil, then I moved to Berlin, worked 3 years there. And now I'm back to Brazil and wanting to do something different. And maybe start studying and teaching with the help of Gilson. And you next. Yeah. Why? It's the game. My name is Anna, but everyone calls me Graf, which is my surname. Actually, I chose it because it's a little bit more different. There was a lot of Annas out there, so differentiate myself a little bit. I'm actually a law student. That's like easy to believe, but it's a bit random. I ended up taking the class from Mr. Gilson, because it's the game production class. I love video games in general, and I do wish to work like in the future, I'll take the more legal aspect of it to work with. So I think that's about it. So if we're doing ladies first.
My name is Simeia. I'm a student of a doctoral program in management, and my thesis is about the use of gamification in programs of training and development for human resource. And it's a subject that I love so much, and I'm so glad to be here tonight. So thank you. And the next, ladies first.
Hi, I'm Juliana Pinheiro. I'm a lawyer, a law professor at the Federal University of Federal University of Rio de Janeiro.
She came from New York.
We have a long partnership. He was my co-supervisor in postdoc about the Brazilian digital games industry and its capability, networks, everything. And actually, I really like to break the rules. And we make rules as lawyers, so it's very interesting. It's a pleasure to be here, all of you, and enjoy this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, so you have to point your finger to
Okay.
someone else.
Essa primeira. My name is Juliana. My name is Juliana Schwartz. I'm a physician and psychiatrist. I'm interested in children psychiatrist. I'm just a partner, so I'm here like a mental health supervisor, whatever.
Thank you, Juliana. Thank you for all your help, not only for my mental health, but for everything here that's taking place. Thank you very much. We are good work and doing this together. Now you have to point your finger to someone else.
So, depois? Sou female,
No, so ladies lawyer done.
Your times, okay?
My name is Gabriel Kramer. I study music at USP and I play for you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I participate in a class with Gilson. He's my teacher, professor at USP, and it's a very cool class because it's game production, and I am very excited to be here and to learn everything about this subject.
My name is Pedro Zambarda. I'm a journalist, editor-in-chief of Drops de Jogos, a website which covers like the indie scene in Brazilian production and international production. I'm here to cover up all the aspects of this event, and I'm glad to receive Eric and Gilson and such good fellows and good people here. Thank you.
Let me just stress that Pedro is also a political leader. He's recognized as a leader in game issues and also political issues. And he, along with some other fellows here tonight, we are launching this campaign. Gambling is not game.
Gambling is not game. Aposta não é jogo. With the progressive network of games, we have a leftist organization which discuss with Fiocruz, with Gilson, with some different actors about doing good dialogue with government, with the social militants, sort of thing.
Aposta não é gambling.
And to explain that gambling is not a game. Okay.
Rodrigo Dominguez, also known as Spy, or Spy. I returned to the games scene after 7 years of absence. I once was a protagonist in the scene on the early 2000s. I co-organized and co-idealized the Independent Games Festival that nowadays is at SP Games, the Symposium of Brazilian Games. And also I redacted a document that kindled the formation of Abra Games. Unfortunately, something. Yes. As life happened, I had to step out, and I started returning to the scene in 2013 with my PhD, which ended in 2018, working and studying games, how to understand games, how to structure games within all aspects, not just electronics, in a way that we can compare games independent of their construction, instructions, and things. I worked founding my researches in the literacy structuralism field that had the same problems that we have with games today. We still do not have a proper taxonomy to understand and to compare and to analyze games. So I planted the seed and it's growing, which I started the project Genesis to develop the ludoliteracy in society. Applying the tools that I started developing in the PhD and providing services to the gaming community. We have mentorship, academic mentorship, we have consultancy services. And now we are starting the middle of our first step, which is the social and scientific communication about games. And to start this return and officialize this process, we are launching the campaign today. The Gambling is Not Gaming, Aposta Não é Jogo, or Bets Are Not Games also. And I hope to provide a fertile ground for game researchers, which I wish I had. So yeah, I'm in the progressist side of the things. I want to make things easier and more prosperous for those who comes after me. I want to make society understand games better, lose the prejudice they have with games and electronic games more specifically, and help Games for Change and you developers, associations, lawyers, researchers, physicians, and everything game related. So I took philosophy classes to understand better what I had to do, what I had to, how to think and how to behave towards you. And nowadays I'm a undergrad in journalism to better communicate what I need to transmit to you. Pointing a finger, okay. Marcelo.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Marcelo de Vasconcelos. I'm a professor, researcher, and occasionally game designer at the Rua das Tabocas Foundation, Rio de Janeiro. Today I'm having the honor of being Eric loyal sidekick, spotting him from Rio to São Paulo, and then tomorrow back to Rio de Janeiro, where we have him with our international course on game studies at G4C. Fiocruz, it's the oldest and biggest public health institution in Brazil, and have been consistently producing games and reflection adult games. So we think that it could be a powerful player to help to make games more accepted as part of society, as a normal, as a regular thing of human beings, not only as an industry, but as something like part of our story, our culture, our way to interact with it. So it's nice to be here. Okay.
Okay, my name is Marcos Gonçalves. I've been in the gaming industry for 14 years now, more than that. I used to be the chair for IGGA São Paulo from 2011 to 2017, something like that. But I had a lot of hats during this period of time, from volunteer to events organizer, and then to chair of the organization. After that, I tagged along with the Rode Studios, that is a really famous studio in Brazil, and we created a place called Indie Warehouse. That was the very first cluster, co-working, and acceleration space for indie developers. It was the very first that Brazil had. After that, I went to Portugal to do my master's, and the master had to be stopped because of COVID. It happens, and then I got back to Brazil, worked for 4 years at Funcom, working on the Dunia Awakening game that is almost ready to be launched, but I'm not a part of the team anymore. So yeah, and now I am here back in Brazil to got once again in the scene to check what is happening and to see how I can help. Vai lá, amigo.
I'm Marcelo Rigon. They call me Rigon only. I have been in the industry for 21 years now.
Just a second. One of the awardees of our Beach for Change award.
I worked in about 300 educational games so far, and also like small games for public education in Brazil. And since 2017, I started also creating entertainment games. And I did not stop working with education, but I think it's a very good place to be. And I think there's a lot of things that the teachers need to understand how to use game in a different way, because most of them think of games as more fun quizzes. They can see beyond that, and I think there's a lot of more things to explore there. And this is connected with the phone. It's an initiative for the European Union National Institute of Culture. They have a funding for development countries, and in Brazil, I was selected as a studio in that game to be the one developing POM, the Armadillo Island. This is a game that we made about climate change for the schools in Brazil. And now we have a partnership with Colombia as well, and we are trying to get that back to Denmark. Also, because the most involved country from the European Union is Denmark, and then Germany. It's basically, we have like some pedagogical toolkits to how to explore the theme in the classes, and we also have the games that can be used together or not. There's a lot of activities that are more like more practical, just like draw. But in Brazil, especially, very hard for you to have functioning computers in the schools. So we always need to think beyond the use of computers when we are talking about our schools. And I'm also the president for the São Paulo Association of Game Developers. And member of the council we have with the regional associations in Brazil. And we have 21 states in Brazil that have some regional association. And we have this council to see how we will think of the politics, the national politics.
Hi guys, hello everybody. My name is Taz Mariano. I'm a game developer and programmer. I've been in the industry for around 8 to 9 years. I've been doing little stuff, like nothing big, like it's quite hard to measure to all these people here doing awesome things for the industry and everything. But I've been back to Brazil for a little bit more than a year, and I'm trying to come back to the game scene and try to be more part and try to help like a lot of people to improve this great scenery we have and make things better for everybody. Yeah. Everybody. I'm Eduardo Psique, that people coming here to. I am a game designer since 2017, specialized in VR, in part of very big projects, but also very passionate independent ones. I'm also a teacher for a project from the government of São Paulo called Fábrica de Cultura, to translate as Culture Factory. I've been the first game developer teacher when we started doing the game development courses there. And I've been doing that for 10 years. Going to these places and teaching a lot of very cool kids about game development. Last year, I could structure and release a course called Games Factory. We released the games on last year, which is the first technical course, free technical course of game development that we have so far. It's been doing great. And I'm part of a social movement in Brazil called NTST, as a brigadier. It's a little bit, for people who know, it's a little bit to the left. Landless workers, yes. Movement of the landless workers. But it's a urban one, not the rural one. And that's it. That's it from my end. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, my name is Pedro. I work in the University of São Paulo for about 22 years in the institute called Institute of Brazilian Studies. And I play since I was 4. That's it.
Just to stress one point here, Pedro is participated last 5 years in a group of fellow professors and staff at the University of São Paulo who were really aware of the acceleration of change in the internet and digital culture. So we formed a group, a WhatsApp group actually, that started discussing how could we press forward the university to adopt more innovative and to update actually the digital policy of the University of São Paulo. So we've been discussing this for almost 4 or 5 years, and now that is the project that is starting, kicking off at the Institute of Brazilian Studies. The Institute of Brazilian Studies, Instituto de Estudos Brasileiros, is one of the most important cultural institutions in Brazil. It hosts memory of most important writers, collections, archives, libraries, huge archive of Brazilian culture at the University of São Paulo. And one of the things that we've been discussing over the years is how to do some sort of gamification of those archives. So Pedro is very active and has been a very strong supporter of our projects, and we are now kicking off this. So thank you for being here. Now I have to point your finger to someone else who
Hi, thank you. I'm Bruno, also a gamer since birth. I've worked with actually video game publishing, not design, for 20 plus years up into the pandemic. Mostly with esports, but community management in general. Been at Riot Games for 7 years and other companies. But then after the pandemic, I switched to analog games. And now currently I try to help modern board games to kind of create a mass museum, sort of, like help people to get to know that. I have a board game school for kids and adolescents, things.
Not far from
From here it's called Universal. We have after school programs with modern board games for kids, RPG programs, Pokemon, because of demands. And we're also helping schools to bring games to kids' day-to-day life, other than chat, right? Modernize, bringing the modern board games to their attention. And helping some schools build their own game libraries, and so bring modern, our purpose is mostly bring modern board games to Brazilian families and society and culture awareness.
And we once met at the Corners Bakery, because I was listening to their talk, that they were saying, wow, these guys are working with games. That's how we the bakery just at the corner.
Yeah, from esports man.
Yeah. So we have to point your finger to someone else.
Who didn't?
My English is not so good. I am good in Duolingo, but no speaking. Well, my name is very funny for the Brazilian people. My name is Tabajara. It's you see? It's a Indian native name from Brazil. I have grandparents Indian, and I am I am an artist and artist teacher. I started with games in 25 years ago when I worked with a tech toy enterprise. I do some pixel art for games in Mega Drive, Sega Genesis, and then when the tech toy not produce more games, I come to the movies. I do some animations. I work with TV commercials, and I found an art school in the internet, a free art school in the internet. I give classes of art, of the history of art, and 3D, free for 15 years. And so some people call me influencer, it's the name today. But now I work on a Change enterprise. It's an enterprise of games who created a lot of games of words, educational works, games. I work in do the art, do the 3D, but not how game designer. I have a group of friends, and with this group we create some games together. And is this okay?
There's someone online also.
Someone online, okay, online.
So Pedro Vitiello introduced himself. He's a psychologist and he uses games as a tool and a methodology to mental health treatments through socialization of what play, the socialization that playing allows. And he already has a question, so I'm not sure if okay. So he's asking Eric if he's been watching positive results or negative results in the use of this kind of methodology for mental health.
Okay, so we haven't even started talking already.
Yeah, let's continue the talk from earlier today.
Hey, the house is yours. Thank you so much. Really, really thank you. Really, really thanks. And this is just the kickoff of a wonderful future of cooperation and exchanges. Thank you to everyone, those who are online. Eric, the floor, the house, the coach, everything is yours.
Well, it's really nice to hear everyone's backgrounds. It's a really interesting group of people that are assembled here tonight. So I have nothing prepared, so I'm not sure what we're doing.
Yeah, just whatever react to those profiles, or just I'll do the talk show thing.
Okay.
So first, you are not even 24 hours in Brazil. We arrived this morning.
Yeah.
So from that experience, how do you feel Brazil? How do you feel the São Paulo game scene? From what people you've met, how that connects to what you've been doing? What kind of impression you have? Very raw. You not even 24 hours. You're going to spend a few days in Rio. But from what you've seen, how do you feel now?
Wow,
Is
really
it
like
coming to
this is
all
like
the
the reporters, like with the in English you say, "I got your question." What's my impression? Well, I wish I had more sleep so I could show your impression. But I came here overnight on a plane and I didn't get sleep last night. So I guess I would say, well, I mean I guess there's a few things. I mean, I know that so whatever I say is just going to be very structured by the people that I happen to meet, right? That I know already. But I guess it seems like there's a lot of interest here in sort of mixing the research and use of games and deployment of games with people that are also just studying game development and design, right? That I think that it seems like there's an interesting overlap of all of these sort of people. I mean, I think even in some of what how you introduce yourselves. Well, you did some commercial development, but you're also interested in community building, or you're also interested in serious games. So it's very interesting that there's this sort of mixing. I think I find in the United States or North America, it's a little bit more like you're in commercial development or you're in the games for change world, and so it's a little bit more segmented. So I think it's really interesting and healthy here that there's this mixing between academia and public service and education and political activism and games and commercial games as well. So I think it's healthy, right? I mean, I think if you look at other forms of culture, it's not things aren't necessarily so segmented.
Maybe that's one of the advantages of being underdeveloped. So everyone has to play different games at the same time, be in different positions, working, but also studying, doing research, but also teaching, and then designing, and then developing things. That's interesting. I know we all do this, but coming from you, I mean, it's really like, wow, that's true. Sometimes it takes an external view to make us aware of how we are, how mixed we are. In Brazil, we a land of mixtures, a land of overlapping perspectives. Although not only the internet, but the contemporary scene stimulates a lot of radical opposition and, in a sense, segment. But you see that our spirit is not like that. We are very much into mixing cultures, mixing cores. At the same time, you run a game studio, but you're also an activist.
Right.
So that's interesting, the way you capture that.
Well, even tonight, the fact that there's a musician that's opening up an evening like this. So there might be a musician or like a chiptunes musician if it's like a super indie, like alternative thing, but not with academia and research and activism and all these other things. So it's interesting that way. I mean, maybe it's an interesting potential feature of the Brazilian game scene also that it's a lot of intersections of different culture coming together.
Okay, another direct question.
Yes.
What really, why are you here? So I'm going to Brazil.
Yeah. Fine here. Goodbye.
Sometimes you must talk about it. I mean, am I going to Brazil? Should I go to Brazil? So, what was your first expectation of going backwards?
Right.
So, why Brazil? Do you see Brazil as something interesting? What moved you? What made you feel like, well, it's time to go there and check that out?
Well, this is my second time to Brazil. But the first time, I was with a partner who was doing work here, and I was sort of there with them. So this is the first time I'm coming as a professional, doing games-related things here. Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like, sometimes I've been around a long time, and I get invitations to travel places, and there were times when you had asked me to come out to a conference, and the timing wasn't good. And I don't know when we first met, but it was at least 10 or 15 years ago, right? That we first encountered each other. I feel like you were at the NYU Game Center when we were our very first home.
Yeah. I
So that
remember we talking just in front of the elevator.
Right.
That's
right.
the scene that comes over.
Yeah. So that building, that's when we first started. So that was at least 12 years ago. So you and I have known each other a long time, and so there was lots of, I always was interested in coming and supporting the work that you're doing here. But it just hadn't worked out with the timing. Then last summer, I met Marcelo at the DIGRA conference in Spain, because you were organizing the workshops, and I gave some game design workshops, and then you attended the game design workshops, and then you and Flavia, and we were talking. It would be interesting to come out, and you were just very persistent, and we ended up coming here, and I was happy to arrange a trip, and I feel like if I'm here, I like to do a lot of things. So happy to be here in São Paulo, Rio, and I'm doing a lot of things over the next several days. Like,
indeed, you are.
Yeah, workshops with high school students, meeting local developers. I'm giving another lecture. I gave one earlier today. I'm giving another lecture at the conference in São Paulo, and then also a 3-hour workshop on game design there. So, but I'm happy to do all these things and get a sense of the scene. So I'm just arriving, so it's a little bit, it's a little hard to answer your question. But I'm also really, I guess there's a lot of things that I'm thinking about. Like, I'm very interested in what this idea of design research is, what it means to be doing design. Like, you're doing game design, you're doing design. You're not just making commercial entertainment. I mean, that's fun. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a passion for making meaningful games, cool games, fun games. I think that's great, and I love doing that too. But I'm also interested in people that have an expanded creative practice as well. They're doing some teaching or activism, writing, or research, or working with the public in some way. So I'm really interested in the different models for how that happens. And I haven't come to any conclusions, but for example, I was just, Pedro, we were just in Istanbul. That was the Games for Change Istanbul conference, and then between then and now, I was invited to go to India for a design research conference, and that's sort of a different model about what design research is. So then in Europe, where I was last year because I was on sabbatical. So no, I was just traveling around a little bit, based in Italy mostly. But anyway. Why? And I recognize that it's really a privilege to do so much traveling, and I don't want to take it for granted. So I don't want to seem like, I'm like, I don't know, strolling around the world. So but what interests me about specifically these questions of design research is, for example, in part of the talk today, I was presenting some new ideas that I hadn't before, which are about really thinking about how design research happens and how people do design-related research, and what a game design methodology is. If you're you're making a commercial game, you start with an idea and then you prototype it as quickly as possible. And then you figure out, is this working? Is it not working? Do we have good ideas? Actually, we didn't have good ideas, but this other thing turns out to be interesting that we didn't expect. And you proceed. If you're trying to do something innovative, there's no shortcut. You can't design it in advance. You have to play test and iterate and prototype. And that, at least for me, that's my methodology. That's what I teach. But I think that oftentimes when people are trying to do games for change, games to sort of accomplish something in the world for education or games for social good, that the requirements of trying to create something that is has a specific impact can be make it very difficult to make the creative process very difficult. That if you're I guess it's about, this is what I was saying earlier today in the talk that I gave at the hospital. You start with the result. It's very hard to say, well, we're going to make games that teach exactly these math skills to kids in this way, in this context. And then to get the money, you have to describe what the game is. So therefore, we're going to make exactly this game. It's going to work in this way. This is the benefit. This is how we're going to assess it. And then you get these funds, and then you don't really have time to do a real game design process, which involves exploration and uncertainty. And I don't know how to do that, because I don't think anyone is going to, those kinds of funders are not going to give you money to do open-ended exploration, right? So I think it's actually it's a challenging problem, and it's why so many, when we look at educational games or games for change, we say, well, it's so, here's another quiz or another scavenger hunt or another sort of conventional idea of what learning is, because they had to design it in advance and there wasn't this other kind of exploratory process. So I'm using that as an example of saying, like, why it really interests me to see how people are doing this and how it is that we're going to do innovative work in this field.
That really resonates with me, because we have developed this game here. It's a card game, proposal game, and well, it's a gift, and everyone will have a copy of that tonight. This was a call by the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. The poster is on the wall here. It was a campaign just on the door. Okay, so the UNODC.
Can I open this?
Yeah. The UNODC published a call for non-digital games that will be part of an Education for Justice campaign. Local Education for Justice. I presented a project that was exactly the design methodology that we've been discussing. I told them, I want to go to a public school. You spend 1 year writing the kids.
You proposed a process.
A process.
Instead of a product.
Instead of law.
Right.
And that's really amazing, because, interestingly enough, before that, I organized a global game jam session at our department, and I decided I would, during the weekend, I would just stay alone in my room, in my office room, and I would design a card game by myself. And I designed the game and published on the global game jam site, etc. When the UNODC call was published, I said, I will propose something like that, but I don't want to propose a result. I want to propose a process. And we spent a whole year visiting the school and discussing with the kids what kind of game, what kind of card game. Really, lots of sessions discussing with these kids. And then we ended with this game, which is interesting because it's very much similar to the ideas that I had before. But I never made it explicit to them what kind of game I had in my mind. But it came out naturally through an interaction. It was not just me, it was a group of game designers and students of game design. We spent a whole year exchanging ideas and developing a game. We ended up doing this game. So this game is about challenges, proposal, challenges of justice. We have some blank cards, so we want kids to create their own cards. So these are, and then you have the other card. This is published at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime site. And here you have the problem, like you can mix these and let's see, draw a card here. That would be.
Okay.
You should mix that first. Just mix it and think about what kind of challenge is important for you, and then draw one card. Okay.
We're randomizing the.
Okay. So, yeah, what's the problem? What's the challenge?
Problema da polícia.
Wow!
Police brutality.
Well, that's a tough
Police
issue.
brutality.
Police brutality. Okay. So next step, we have the green cards. Right? These are skills that we could use. These are also play. These are skills that you would use to face the problem. So you can mix those cards and then let's see what kind of skills, what kind of ability would be.
If we burn down the bridges, there is one less brutality. If we burn down all the bridges, there will be at least one less brutality. Police cannot throw people off the bridge anymore.
So let's see what kind of skill would be used in order to,
Just one or?
just one to face the challenge of police brutality.
Civil brutality.
Wow. That's weird.
Yeah.
Alimentação de qualidade. So it's good nutrition.
Okay. If the police, if the individual thinks about joining the police, has enough nutrition from the start. All individuals have enough nutrition from the start since babies. There will be less things to concern about that. Lots of people join the police force for two reasons. It's easy to get meal.
That's the point.
And it's easy to get authority. So if you need to fight to not stay hungry, you will need to establish some kind of authority to others, so you can have some control and such. You see this with family chiefs, and the nutrition, you have one less thing to worry with. You have for the rest of life to worry.
In other words, peace and justice depend on the quality of our nutrition. And if we are malnutrition, if we are hungry, you know that the Brazilian government has been trying to fight it. If you are hungry, you are violent.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have enough good quality nutrition, you're hungry for everything. You lack everything. Your own body is not prepared to deal with life.
I believe it can also be seen as a metaphor for payment.
For pain?
Yes, police is famously underpaid, and usually funding for the police. I'm not advocating for funding more the police. However, usually the funding for the police goes to repressive equipment and weaponry, and never to the working class. So you have these people with authority, and at each week they have a little bit more weapons, and they're still very frustrated because they are, again, underpaid, which is highly connected to police corruption, and they become these very powerful individuals with very little to lose. And I believe it's also,
And of course,
connected to the
drug wars, drug trafficking, drug addiction is one way out of hunger. It's one way out of hunger. So police brutality is directly related to this impossible situation we live in Brazil, where the majority of the people malnutrition, and they have to feel like, well, I'm feeling some sort of happiness or some sort of gratefulness in life. Drugs. The police is in charge of repressing the only alternative to nutrition, which is drug addiction. Do anyone want to talk about this?
Yeah, starving thief. It's a non-criminal here in Brazil, but for policemen, it's a crime. It's nothing. If you go to the judge, it's not a crime. And the second, it's just an expression that we know a lot here in Brazil. When you have some bill of traffic policeman, hey, put the coffee here for me.
Yeah.
The coffee, it's some money.
Right. So that's the idea of this game.
A little coffee.
Have children in our schools to draw the cards.
I want to deal with that.
Oh, yeah.
If I understand, you have to use one card to fight with another. Okay. Everybody say a lot of good things, but when I first thought about it, I think, I give it the left to one team and fight against the policy. Okay. This game can go to the side, the fun side of the thing, and not necessarily think about the problems. You think about this in this game.
Yeah, although the drawings are quite, the art direction sets quite a kind of a serious, it's not a playful, depiction of police brutality, for example. Graf, what did you?
I think I'd like to make an association between the access to nutrition, to food, and access to culture and knowledge. I think police brutality comes mainly from people not having access to quality knowledge, to quality education. Most of the people who actually become cops, become part of the police enforcement, never had actual access to formal education. They never had access to actual culture. Mostly in Brazil, we do not have a stimuli for people to access culture in general, because most people my age or below do not have the proper structure in their households or food-wise to actually have the time and the mind to do so. So the public theater has a lot of free events, but most of the people who actually go there will be people who would already access them if they weren't free, because the people who would need it to be free do not have the time or even know that it is happening. Food is essentially the basis to which someone would actually access everything else. Someone who doesn't eat cannot think. You first need to eat and to live, and someone who does not have access to that is more prone to aggressivity in the future. They don't have access to grow in a culturally diverse environment and a culturally healthy environment. Therefore, they develop into police brutality. You have in a reflection of that. People who become cops oftentimes, they become influenced by this little power they possess because they never truly comprehend the situation they were in before. They tend to abuse this power. I think if you comprehend culture, would never be, let's say, in the right wing of politics. If you comprehend the structure which creates the society we live in, and so I think that's a part of the phenomenon for right-wing people who vote against their own rights. And I think food could be seen as a part of that. And having food would diminish police brutality, even if it didn't diminish police itself. I mean, people would still enter the police, but being more informed, being more culturally wise, I think they would use less violence, use less brutality.
I also think that there's a connection between big tech, big farm, and the big food chain, the big ultra processed,
the big agro,
big agro-industrial powers. So we are being fed by this connection between big corporate powers where food, drugs, violence, these are all connected. And this affects the game industry as well, in the sense that big tech is connected to big pharma, to food and nutrition. There is, Juliana's been doing research on that. That's what in the medicine research area is called gut-brain axis. There is a connection between the gut and the brain. Many physicians say that the gut is the second brain. So violence is lack of culture. Brutality is anti-civilization, anti-civilization, anti-culture, anti-education. So, well, that could be, a subject for the students to discuss and to create these connections. And of course, the teacher will be there to help them, develop that. I always, when I draw these cards, I'm always surprised by the combinations and how the game itself is a process. So it was a process to create the game, but the design process itself and the blank cards as part of this is a stimulus for the kids and for the teachers to keep playing as a process and not play as a road to being the winner or the strategy to be the most intelligent in the group. It's a process of discussing. So we are distributing this game in public schools, and that's exactly the game design as a process, and games as objects or cultural objects.
And it's a political behavior.
Changes in political behavior.
On that note, I have a very design question that we can only mention because they have this unreplicable experience, which is, do you feel that there is some still unexplored or underexplored ways in which games can actually change society? Just a simple question.
Which games can what?
How do you think,
change society?
Yes. Do you think there are ways that are still underexplored, of how games could actually change society?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because in some of my classes, I sometimes do a unit on impact games, and can we think about ways that games, do have an impact. And it's very hard to find in the literature a kind of like a typology or ontology of here's different ways that this media can affect culture. Certainly with games, here's different ways that this game, and yeah, I actually think that it's kind of an unanswered question. So it's absolutely, I think, very wide open. I mean, there's lots of ways to answer that question. But I will say for this class that I teach, because I don't feel like there is like here's a list of ways, that there's this idea that when you're doing activism, or proposing an activist project, that you propose a theory of change, right? Which is like, well, I believe that this project will make this change in this way. There's lots of ways of doing that. One way of doing that is with I don't know if the grammar is the same in Portuguese, but have you heard of so that change? So you say, like, for example, you say, well, children will play my game so that they will be exposed to this kind of thinking, so that they will improve in this skill, so that they will improve in their general language skills, so that then after school they will have this set of skills, so that later in life when they're trying to use language, so you can create, so that they sort of, either improve themselves or their communities in some way, but it starts with them playing the game and then it ends with sort of a larger change. So that's one way of constructing a theory of change. Yeah, Graf?
I think I'd like to first add into this. I think there's a huge gap in educational video games for adults. I think mostly the educational and activist projects end up directed towards children, which is great and is essential, but I think there's a huge gap in those games directed at adults. I think it is something that needs to be covered, especially since the population is getting older and it is a major part of society. Another thing, I'd like to ask if you think about the possible negative impacts of games and gamification certain.
Sure. I have not done answering the first question though. I did say, let me say a couple more things first. I think so that's one thing is sort of, I think that if what you're doing, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if what you're doing is that you're trying to design something that will have some kind of impact, then really trying to think through what is the process of impact is part of the design problem, right? And again, just as we were saying, you can propose something and that you also have to kind of explore that and see, right? It's not something that you necessarily know against. I think another part is that there was a lot of hype early on in the earlier sort of generations of Games for Change. When games were, the expression in English is a silver bullet, meaning like it's a small thing, it's like a magical, I just shoot this one bullet and then I guess it's a vampire, right? But it's like, it magically destroys the problem, right? So I guess I would say that we don't think about books that way. We don't a book is not, oh, a child reads this book and then they have all this change their mind and behavior, they learn a skill. It's no, a book has to be deployed in a very particular context, like in a school, as part of a larger curriculum, with a teacher, other students, what are they doing with the book? It's like one part in a whole system, right? You're analyzing it, you're discussing it, maybe you're doing some creative writing to the book with the book, it's a play, you're acting out the characters in the book. So many ways to use it, but it's not like the book itself doesn't do anything. It just sits on a table. And even if you read it by yourself, it doesn't necessarily do anything. But the fantasy of games was that games, because they're active, it's like you just play through the games and you get through all the levels and you've learned all the algebra. And I don't believe that games are like that. I mean, even this game requires facilitation. We're here with a room full of sort of experts, right? So we sort of took it to a high level right away, but that wouldn't work in a classroom. So that's another thing is that I think that we have to sort of get rid of this idea of that the game is all by itself. But every designer does that. Any good architect is not designing a building in the matrix. They're designing a building in the real world. They're looking at the history and the context and the people. Maybe they don't build something new. Maybe they're renovating using local materials. You have to think about the site, as architects say, right? So that's part of design. But I think a lot of times educational game designers are just trying to design silver bullets.
I like to make an analogy. Games and tools. You wouldn't trim your nails with a hammer. But a hammer is a tool. You will trim your nail with a trim, with a sandpaper, whatever. It's the same with the games. You won't train your brain with Doom. You will train your brain with Brain Age, with Sudoku, with Abaizu. You won't vent your frustration with Sudoku or Abaizu. You will vent your frustration with Doom.
Questionable. Sudoku is pretty stress relieving.
And Doom, well,
your reflex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as well. But you get the point.
Of course.
There is a tool for a situation. There is a game for a situation. I think the question is, how do we know, how do we understand which game for what situation we need?
Right. I don't know if it's that simple. I don't know if it's a simple one-to-one relationship.
I believe it's not that one-to-one, but it's an analogy, something that...
Maybe multiple tools.
Yes.
Right. A combination of various skills to fix something. It's never just one thing.
The last thing that I want to say about this really interesting question about unexplored brain for games. I feel like one thing that games, it's part of when I talk about games and impact, I often use examples from the art world, my art. Because I feel like, and I mentioned this in the talk today, but my parents were professors of art education. So they were training artists. They were artists who became art educators who became professors of art education. And I know that it's not really like a very sexy discipline, art education, right? But it is. Well, okay, but you know, an art educator. So an art educator is not thinking about a painting. Oh, this painting teaches this skill. This painting injects this information into the viewer. It's not that so simple because we're talking about works of culture. Instead, they see a painting or a museum as a context or conversation, or sort of what led us into the book. And I think that even artists themselves, I think a lot of when I think about politically activist work, it is something which is often less instrumentalized. Meaning that it's not so, it's not thought of in such a kind of a hard functional way, and instead it's more, it's some things that ask questions, that use ambiguity, that provoke, that can mean different things to different people. And I think there's many ways that, I don't think there's one way that games can have an impact on people, but I want to sort of try to expand our palette of approaches that we can take. And I think that games I think that what could be interesting is to think about, not games that I think if we're talking about really wide cultural impact, I think it's hard for things that are explicitly educational to do that. Things that are in classrooms, educational films are not going to kind of change the film world, right? But there are films that have had big impacts on people's thinking in society. So I guess I want to think about games in that sort of broader sense of how they can have a cultural impact. And for me, a lot of it is less about. This is why today I was saying I don't like. Here's my message. Am I getting it across? It's like good art often has multiple messages, ambiguous messages. Again, ask questions instead of giving answers.
I think it's not just the moment of the game, of the playing game, but the moment of sharing the playing with the community, with the
whole
context.
social life. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Graf, do you want to address Graf's question next door?
I think we're going to comment on this
Okay.
section, so maybe.
No, I was just going to add that because of this question and the way that the talk is going, that I really like to look at games in a similar way that we look at fairy tales. So when we are trying to pass a message, we don't just pass the message. We try to use it, for example, nowadays we use memes. But memes come from memetic. It's a biology aspect that is to promote the message or that information. So when we look for games and we are trying to make it more memetic, let's say that like that, it's a way to generate impact because the information will spread and everyone will receive this in a different way, like what we are saying. So we cannot expect the result, but we can expect like that it will impact in some way by doing that, something like that. It's the way that I really like to see games because games are like fairy tales, but it's a fairy tale that you participate because you interact with it. So it's the way that I kind of like to do.
So, I will connect very closely with what Graf said, but I'll talk a bit about my experience with games because I'm a physicist and I happen to be involved with game design when I went to games. And when I first started creating games, we had a contract that I had to deliver one game a day. Yeah. So
Really?
In 6 months, we made 100 educational games in 6 months. Like we couldn't do art. We just have like to assemble that and do like level time tools for the teachers. But it was a very like, for me, it was a very life-changing experience because the company almost failed. And then I had to train the teachers and the students in the school. So I got to see like they using. So even with these games that were like very cheap kind of games done in one day, and there were some of them that the children would ask to stay at the room during the break because they enjoyed like so much the game.
Right.
So I said, oh, okay, I don't have to do like a very expensive game for that to be fun. Right. I can use very little tools to deliver like fun, and it can be an educational game. And like so, like for like Rocksmith, I love Rocksmith, and that I talked with a lot of people that teaches music in school, and they told me that Rocksmith solves one problem that they have.
Rocksmith?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
It's a music game. Yeah, that you put your bass or your guitar.
Oh, okay.
And
Rock
play
bands.
with
Rock band.
And what was the problem that they issue? Because when you are starting to learn an instrument, you are not bad at it. Like everyone sucks on everybody. So you don't want to play because you know you suck. And then with the game, like he's playing, and the game like lower your volume when you are like missing too much of the notes and increase it like it. But it gets you to play with the instrument. And that's what you need to understand the size of each of the bars, all the threads, all the lines. Like how long is one line to the other? Like playing with the instrument is one of the crucial things for you to learn to use an instrument. And in a school, it's difficult for you to make the person, oh, okay, you have like to practice in your room like 100 hours before you come back here. So games can have you these like, experience things that maybe outside of the context of a school has not like a strong impact, but with a school, it can have a major impact, even if it was not meant for education. In Brazil, we have Tainá Félix, that like I love the work of Tainá Félix, and she will be like in Estudos, Rio de Janeiro, and she had a OGM that would teach like games for education, and what she would do, so she would not like create games or make it or take educational games into the school. She would teach the teachers how to use commercial games in the context of the classroom. So like, ask your, like, let's say that now everyone's talking about Assassin's Creed.
Right.
Ask your students to make an essay. What's wrong in Assassin's Creed Shadows that just released? So they are like looking into this game and they can use that as a tool to learn more about history. So maybe we have to stop thinking of the game by itself.
Right. Right. I mean, I think there's many interesting things in what you said. One is that process that you described of making a game a day. That's an amazing, like ninja training or something that you go through, right? And then you also realize, oh yeah, 1 out of 10 of these the kids like, right? Yeah. But that's such a great example of what we're talking about with process. So why aren't people proposing our team is going to make a game a week for 6 months? And we know most of them won't be good, but they're acknowledging that like that's what exploration and experimentation could be in a design process. So I think that, because you know what, commercial companies do that. Every commercial company has a stage gate process. They have this many concepts that become this many designs, that become this many prototypes, that become this many alphas, and then finally like one thing reaches the public, but there was like maybe 100 or more concepts that were generated, right? But then they stage gate them, they kill them at a certain point because they know they have to be successful. So why are we doing that with educational games, right? I mean, that's one answer. I also think, Marcus, what you said about what you said about the guitar game is really interesting too. That just playing the game and time on the instrument. I remember hearing, I think it was Danny Hillis. Did he help invent like parallel processing? Some famous technologist. He was speaking at a Games for Change years ago, and he was saying that he was talking about. He sees all these people playing. It was when Guitar Hero first came out and Rock Band were new games. So he was saying like, I see them playing and they're really playing and they think they're playing music and they're enjoying these classic things. And that's what he says. But at least some of them end up learning real rock and roll guitar. And the audience was like, oh yeah, yes, that's true. That's a good thing. And then I just had a weird double vertigo, because on the one hand, at first I thought, well, yes, everyone in the audience is saying, oh, we all know that's a good thing, playing rock and roll guitar. But 50 years earlier, rock and roll guitar was seen as like the devil's music and like the fall of civilization and over-sexualized or whatever you want to say, right? So that music was just seen as like, but today, sort of things have shifted. And so we no longer see rock and roll as somehow like the gutter of culture. We see it as like everyone is saying, yes, of course, it's a human value and it's a form of important human expression. Every child should be playing music and listening to music, making music, composing music. We simply see it as one of these sort of the valued arts, right, in culture. Even as we were talking about here, the idea of culture, right, and public theater. And then I thought, okay, so that was one thing. I was like, oh, well, rock and roll. And then I thought, well, why aren't we not, when he's just talking about they're playing Guitar Hero? So then I'm thinking about some future where we're all much older, and then there's someone saying, oh, these kids, they're doing some weird thing. I don't know what they're doing. They're poking themselves through their skin and making this weird thing, but at least some of them are getting into video games. And then everyone is saying, oh, yes, of course, we all know video games are this sort of value culture. So anyway, that's also part of, I think, what I'm doing, and also part of thinking about how games can have impact, trying to think about educational games, the way we think about film and fine art and literature as having an impact is sort of trying to elevate games up to this idea. And we're sort of kind of there, kind of not there. I guess the whole thing about gambling and bets and games here is people feel it's dragging games back down, right? So a lot of it is about this, the kind of cultural status of games as well that has an impact too.
Okay, so any questions? It's now.
No, there's another one here.
Thank you. There's one question.
Yeah, the first one. Question from Pedro. I can repeat it.
The question before we start
about methods for psychological.
Yeah, how you see like positive and negative impacts of using games.
I don't know. Are there any psychologists in the room that can answer the question? I mean, my point of view as a designer, but I think that I wouldn't take my word for I'm not a mental health expert, so I only can give you anecdotal.
Can I build on that a little bit? So on the side, I help parents, coach parents, and do keynotes on the positive side of video games. What would you say to a non-believer parent who always sees games as an addiction? What would be your key arguments?
What would be mine?
Defense of games, being his life.
All right, so that's I guess I can answer that question. I mean, first I would say I feel like there's been lots of research that shows that playing video games, not even board games, but video games specifically, combines so many of the cognitive health. You're doing hand-eye coordination, you're doing pattern recognition, you're doing problem solving, that it is, according to research studies that I've seen, that it is a kind of like superfood for cognition. Like they say that if you're an elderly person and to not go into decline, what do you do? They say things like you learn a new language, or you learn like a new kind of dancing, like ballroom dancing, something that is like learning a new system of eating. Well, every game is like that. So games do that so naturally. So that I think that's one thing I would say. And yeah, I guess another thing I would say is that, you know, I don't know, maybe that's enough. I guess I would also say that there's a huge diversity in games. Often parents have this thing in their head, they think that all games are sort of like shooting and military simulations, and that's not really true. Like if they don't want their children playing that kind of game, that's okay. There's so many interesting positive games that, you know, that are often very social, collaborative.
Can I have a quick statement?
Yeah.
Could you give an example of like some game that really influenced you in a positive way in your life?
Sure, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is the first game I watched. So I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was in 5th grade, which I think in American school I was like 8 years old or something like that. So sort of discovered it with friends. And I got so much out of that game. I mean, everything from mathematics. So I remember, because you roll 3d6 and that's your stats, you know, strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, charisma, constitution. So got it. So anyway, I haven't played D&D in a long time though. So we wanted to know what were the percentage chances, and we just brute forced it, like every combination, counting up, doing division as little kids, because we were so like, is there a 90, what is the percent chance that you'll roll 3d6? So we wanted to know, because then we had a system you could re-roll once, is it worth re-rolling, what are the chances to get better? So that's just one example, but also, you know, social skills like acting, creative skills like drawing, storytelling, all of the sort of the collaboration, problem solving. I mean, it's mind blowing what you can get from Dungeons and Dragons. And we were just doing it by ourselves. That wasn't with like a D&D dad, which is they say in America, that's sort of the new phenomenon. All the people that grew up playing games, being Dungeons and Dragons are now. So that, to me, that's a really good example. What's one for you?
For me,
yeah. How would you answer your own question? Like, what's a game that you feel impacted you positively?
Man.
See, it's hard. It's
very hard. It's very hard.
Yeah, just one.
Yeah. I believe playing video games as a child, I was very hard to relate to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, video games kind of gave me a way to connect with other friends, but also gave me a way to try to, just like problem solving, trying to find other ways of
they help you, they help you with that failure, for example.
Yeah. But one thing that I also really like was playing bad games, just like playing good games and bad games, just like games like.
So it developed your sense of aesthetics and taste.
Yeah, exactly, and just like how to try to improve things, like find out why this game is so much better than this.
Like you now,
yeah,
professional game player.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was so mad that I gosh, this sucks. I need to do better by myself.
Yeah, I would like just to add to your comment on D&D, because I've been playing since I was a small child as well, all kinds of tabletop RPG, and I had this experience that I was playing with a friend, and he struggles a lot to say no. He still struggles a lot to say no. He's better now, but like people would ask him the most absurd stuff, and he would just do it because he couldn't say no. And then we played this cyberpunk campaign, and he made this character that only did what she wanted. The campaign was horrible. Like we played for 6 months and she did crazy stuff, and we all had to deal with all the problems that she created. And in the end, it ended bad. Like she died, we all died. But after 6 months, he invited me for a coffee because he wanted to talk about his experience. And then he told me, like, this was my first time in my life trying to not do what people want from me. And I was experimenting with like the total opposite direction, and it was like I learned so much, you know, about like there's probably a midpoint there that I still need to find, but to me it was one of the most powerful experience that I had playing RPG, because I really saw that like, and then again you're saying like we weren't doing that with any professional or with any intention of doing something for mental health, but it really helped him to start dealing with that. So
that's
awesome.
a beautiful story, and I think that I didn't even talk about that, but that sense of of gaining a sense of identity or exploring alternate identities, which is at the heart of role playing. That's what role playing is. In my experience, and again, I think about as a kid, I feel like we were exploring sometimes our idealized selves, like who we wanted to be, and sometimes our transgressive selves, who we couldn't be in real life. And it sounds like in your friend's case, it was kind of both at the same time. And that's maybe why it was so powerful. They were transgressing against what they felt their inclination was, but also trying to move themselves into a space that they wanted to inhabit. So that's really, it's a really, really cool story.
First, add on to the comment. I learned English through video games, actually. Totally from video games. So that's really interesting. Really shows the potential or the length you'd go to actually read comic books. I'd like to restructure my question, which I did before, about the negative impacts as well as the good, and also the aspect of adults and video games. Starting with an example, he cited the new Assassin's Creed game, and during the production and the publicity for this game, there was a lot of polemics in regards to the two main characters, which is a woman and a black man. And I think it really shows how the video game community can sometimes be really toxic and stimulate young people to be toxic. I think that's a potential that we need to discuss, because it's something that really happens, and it's something we as, like, supposing we're trying to advocate for games for change, should be trying to stop as well. That's why we create new products which will positively influence society. In practice, most adults, we think, have a formed opinion, but that's not necessarily true. My grandmother used to be a history teacher, Brazilian history, and she taught during the dictatorship in Brazil. She was actually surveilled and shitty things in mind. And somehow nowadays she's extremely far right wing. And that's a really sad thing, because I knew her before and she progressively became worse, and she's a perfectly sane person. This is not a state of decadence of mind. She simply changed opinion radically from someone who was extremely progressive and taught history, from someone to someone who doesn't believe in the history she taught. She was a victim of the dictatorship and still no longer believes in it. And I think we really need to talk about the internet and the video games as.
Oh, and you're saying that you feel she was influenced by the internet or social media?
Yeah, I mean, she was influenced. She took those WhatsApp groups and social media now, and suddenly she was a completely different person. And I think video games also have this potential. Any girl who plays onto online mods, for example, will see that they're extremely toxic. If you do so much as open your mind or type something, or let's say your game tag means you're a woman, it instantly becomes a toxic environment for you. And I think that stimulates younger people, especially younger boys, to play into those stereotypes, creating a youth generation as well as an older one that is extremely anti-progressive, a movement that goes in the complete opposite direction that we're trying to promote. I think that's something that we need to talk about, and I'd like to ask you how you think we should go about it, how you go about it.
Right. Just a second, Marcelo wants to add something. I want to just give a bit more context to the question, because I work. I did my PhD in a health institution. It was the first research on game studies in the institution. It mainly has a way to justify to my wife all the time I play, but anyway, they gave it, and so I started to research, and has one of the few that deals with games at Fiocruz. I'm constantly asked about, okay, but games cause addiction, right? Games cause violence, right? And all the time you have to keep repeating the same things. The research don't show anything like that. We have to be careful what the media says about all the moral panics and of the issue. But indeed, there is a huge overlap between the gamers in Brazil, at least in Brazil, and the incel community and the extremist community. And it's terrible because there are really games special as particularly into sports and other communities that are less on the surface of the internet. That is a way to recruit, especially the youth. So we see this kind of thing, and there are a lot of people worried about the violence that are in games. But I think that's actually should concern us. There are very few people researching this. Is the violence that we are bringing into the games, into the game communities, because these older guys, because of a lot of different facts, they have these distorted views about reality, about women, about different ethnic people, and so they started to entice, especially the youth, with games, of course, nice game conversation, and then start to distill this kind of things. So I think it's a major problem in health, the health side, but also the legal side, of course. And so in this thing that she discussed about your grandma, right? It's very, very common. I heard of someone who was actually tortured during the dictatorship, and now he is far right now. So it's something that people are still struggling to understand.
Well, I have, I can say, yeah, here's the one simple solution that will fix all of the problems related to social media and I mean, it's a very pervasive problem. I think that I don't see this as coming from games, but I see it as sort of part of a lot of the problems with social media and the way that people get informed today, that they're informed through friends groups and through sort of fake news sources and things like that. And there's been so part of it is about journalism and, the fact that social media has degraded this idea of journalistic ethics or trusted sources or just journalistic institutions. But I think there's a lot of overlap between games, video games, and all of the sort of toxic internet culture, because video games are so much online and they are so much about sort of anonymous interactions with people. But yeah, it's a huge problem. No, I'm sorry, I don't have the answers to everything. I don't want to say I'm just a game designer, but it's important that we're it's something that we're aware of, and it's something that we study and look at. But does anyone know? Is there here's the solution to the thing to do? I don't think that exists right now.
I would say that I don't have a solution, but I would add something. Just to give a little more of context about this relation. I think there are two major things to be taken in consideration. One of them is that the games, by a lot of not important things, it was like a more like excluded main person space in the past. So they kind of like pushing back like women from trying to occupy this place, and that made some kind of reaction. But there is another important thing that happened, I think 2010, that's the Gamergate, because the Gamergate regulation was an experiment from Steve Bannon and the Cambridge Analytica that used the gamer community to start experimenting on these far-right recruiting techniques. Yeah. So it started in the ecosystem of games, and it created a lot of problems, especially for Zurichin and the initiatives in Brian. But it was just like a start that we began with games, but only like because it was a very like online space that they couldn't experiment on, and now it's not exactly there. There's a development that doesn't happen in games, but can
in the media around games.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be dark corners of the internet, but I also think that there's another. I just was listening to a long podcast about this for the New York Times, but that American technology companies like Meta, which was Facebook, I think there was recently new books have come out that are sort of like employees that are writing about, here was my time, I was there for 8 years, and
Whistleblower.
What?
Whistleblower.
Yeah, whistleblowing. So there's a new book that just came out, I think, in the last couple of weeks. And for example, this person said that there just was a hunger to increase the audience, make money, and all of this stuff about, we really want to do that. Well, it was just bullshit. And it really was ridiculed within the company, devalued. They would fund things and not do anything with them. And that they were always basically not funding their own regulatory systems that might have put a stop to like the huge waves of bad, like fake news and just false claims and things like that maybe influenced your grandmother, right? So, and that's in Facebook or Meta, which is like the most vanilla, mainstream kind of sort of innocuous social media. So I think that that's part of it too. I'm not for censoring media or controlling media, but I do think that there's laws about false advertising, right? You can't make false claims in advertising. So it's very unfortunate. And now, of course, in the United States, all of those media companies are really, on their knees in front of Donald Trump, giving him a blowjob, basically. I mean, he's bringing them into his, come to my inauguration and coming to my office, and it's disgusting, So anyway, it's really, I don't know. I don't know if the problem's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, I think maybe from Brazil there will be some hope.
Let me put some fire. I'm now researching with professors in Mozambique about digital abandon.
Apathy?
No, abandon digital. Digital abandon.
Quitting the digital.
No, not quitting. When you keep the children
Chupeta digital. Traduz chupeta digital. Eu uso muito esse
Digital
termo.
pacifier. Like children
Right. You're
left
leaving them in front of digital
Yes.
devices. Digital babysitter.
And now in Brazil, there's a lot of condemnation, judicial process about this for parents, for professors, for schools, and they're trying to guilt the social media companies. They have good lawyers, nothing is going on. But in Mozambique, there was a huge case, and we are making research about that. So I invite all of you, if you have some material about that, because it's a very interdisciplinary question, problem. And all the time they are talking about the guilt of digital games. And I think it's a misunderstood, and I think the way you rationalize in your books about the game design can change the way that people think about games, the prejudice about games. Do you have any research about that? About the prejudice about in games, something like this?
The prejudice inside of games or the sort of cultural status of games?
Both.
Yeah, I mean, now my mind is blurry because I'm on so little sleep, but was this the question that I answered earlier today about so in the United States, did I say that games were, no, I said here that games were about violent and addictive and for kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that something did change. But I don't know about people studying that history and why that happened.
Maybe scapegoat. Have so many other factors.
About digital games, I don't know. I read a lot, but what I've seen was always the media always treating video games, electronic games, as childish things and such, and things change, right? But for board games like backgammon and chess and also card games, there is a book by Gina Bloom, Gaming the Stage, in which she traces a parallel about how games fostered the theater scene in the Victorian England. And she traces some very interesting history about prejudices being built from backgammon, chess, and cards. That it's interesting to think about.
There is a book called The Politics of Moral Panic that kind of deals in
yes,
games,
this brings the panic. But Gina Bloom in her book, she brings some progressive historical facts that we can. It's not direct. She does not mention that. Okay, it's due to this, due to that, but we can assume because it starts with the king saying to his son, to the prince, that those games are great and this and that, and then the serf start to playing as well. It was the field of its beginning of capitalism, and the serf or the proletariat start to play, and then the game started not being more a good thing, but a bad thing for the people, of course. And then entered the church because people started not going to the church and starting playing games instead.
That's really interesting.
And we can trace, at least in a sociological level, how the prejudice started to be built from social, religious contexts.
I can't think of maybe for contemporary social media, this is just me speculating, but a couple of dimensions. I mean, one is, and I mentioned it at the lecture today, but design education I think is really important. So that the people that are studying technology, computer science, like the computer science, in many places where it's taught does not have, like, you don't talk about the ethics of technology and use in society, right? So, I mean, and same thing in game programs. Some game programs are very vocational. We teach you software, we push you into industry. Where the program where I teach at New York University, we have a very strong, let's look at history, let's look at game studies and textual studies, social studies, and that we integrate that into design. So I think part of it is that these people that will be designing technological experiences need to be educated in a sort of humanist ethics, right? It doesn't even need to be super lefty progressive ethics. It would be great if it was, but it just is about recognizing that there's a social dimension to being a designer, technology designer. The other thing is that strikes me, and I'm sure there's a similar book in Brazil, but there in the United States, I think it was in the 1960s and 70s, there was a book, Dr. Spock's Baby Book, which sort of like, this book came out and it changed, and I don't even know how it changed, but I know that it replaced a lot of sort of folk wisdom about babies with sort of more modern science, like what babies actually needed to sort of for good physical health and mental health, and it became the sort of Bible for parents, because I think every parent even if they're overworked and they end up having to have to put their kid in front of a computer, they want to be a good parent, right? I mean, let's say almost virtually every parent, they really are trying to do the right thing. I'm not a parent, so I don't want to speak for parents, but that's my sense, having many, many close friends that are parents. So maybe that's also an interesting lever, is like not, convincing the tech companies and that sort of technological policy is important, but you're fighting capitalism, right? Mm-hmm. So another lever is really like social campaigns about what is good parenting, or research or books or what have you, but not research for other researchers, but research for the public. So I don't know.
Thank you.
But what Marcelo told, the book, it's also interesting because the panic built. It's important for us to acknowledge how that kind of panic, usually we call satanic panic because of the moral implications.
But panic implies there's not a real problem.
Yes.
That it's just a nervousness, right? And that is part of it. But I think that what we're acknowledging is that actually there are some problems.
It's important for us to understand how and when it starts to getting built, so we can act before the panic states itself.
3 weeks ago, I was in New York with the professor Jonathan Haidt, the ancient generation. And he was the room for some conference to avoid cell phones inside classes.
Right.
His doctrine was is spread around the world. What do you think
about not
having cell phones?
Until 14 years, right?
Yeah.
There's multiple movements that are doing that. There's just in New York State, the state of New York, there was a new bill to not have cell phones. They call it bell to bell. So beginning of the school day to the end of the school day, you're not allowed to have any cell phones. So not during lunch, not between classes, you're not allowed to have it in school. So there's definitely momentum there. I think people are recognizing that it's, distracting or destructive or, building bad habits for adults. So I don't know if I know that the opposition to the law was talking about, well, parents want to reach their children at any time so that if they don't have
in his book is guilty games, for example.
Oh, he is. Okay.
That's
right. So games get. I mean, games are like anything. I don't think games are good or bad. I think that games, just like books, there's good. There's books that are great to read, and in general, reading is good. But that doesn't mean that all books are good or that reading every book is good.
Well, it's 10 o'clock. Marcelo, you are the last one.
I'll make a practical question this time. I have had experience with working with teachers from high school, like for using the design or some kind of.
Yeah, I have, and sometimes I've actually done workshops with high school students.
And how was it? Because here in Brazil, at least, I had a lot of problems talking with teachers because
with teachers?
Yes.
With the students, I don't have any problem at all. I've worked with kids in after-school programs, kind of like the board game after-school program. There's a wonderful one in New York City called the Brooklyn Game Lab.
Yeah.
Their feedback. Sometimes I've run play tests with them. Their feedback it's as good as my graduate students. They go right. Also because they're so honest.
Yeah.
Kids give great honest feedback. And if they're in a program like that, their literacy is very high. They've played a lot of games. They really understand game design. So anyway, with teachers, it's hard. Teachers are overworked, and it's, I was just talking with someone about this issue in the United States. The nonprofit organization I ran a commercial game studio for about 10 years. We created a nonprofit organization called the Institute of Play that was designing schools where games and play were the model for learning. And they also did other things. They ran teacher professional development courses where teachers would come and basically learn how to integrate games into their curriculum. But the thing is, in the United States, teachers in public schools in most states are required to do, let's say, every year, 6 hours of professional development. So they're looking for a class I can take or a workshop because I'm required to, and then it's paid for by, you're required to do it, so we're paying you to do it. So they would pay the nonprofit organization. So, but I think it's different in Brazil. There's not that same structure. So yeah, it's hard. I have no idea what the I do know that over the years, just like I said, the D&D dads, I don't want to genderize it because there's plenty of great D&D non-male players as well, but that basically as gamers grow up, then it's like it's a healthy thing, right? Which is another answer to this question of, the cultural status of games. But I feel like with teachers, it's the same thing. Many of the teachers for years were like the youngest teachers because they grew up playing games. They weren't scared of them. They sort of knew how great they were. So it may be just a generational shift has to happen.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock now. And, well, I'm so thankful. You can, of course, stay around for a while. And thank you so much. Thank you, Ed. Thanks for
Thanks,
everyone.
and congratulations to Gilson on the Games for Change.
Okay, so you will have some kind of pleasure for an interview.
I bring your book. I want to sign.
You first. Thank you so much. Thank you. Estamos hoje dando início a essa campanha. Aguarde o book.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah,
You see your book in Portuguese?
I have